So now, ladies and gentlemen, after listening to what I said earlier before, in the beginning for the introduction that a visionary speech on are the US and China doomed to enmity? So what had Professor had tell us, I was listening right there, just right next to the station, and I just got there some short notes over here. I'm not sure if you agreed with me. Well, one thing is at the end when Professor said that, well, at the optimistic side is that he believes, and I also believe that after all of this, the world will get better and better, because I also believe he has such long vision and he's seen the world more than me, of course. So I think it's best that we look forward to the optimistic side that after all this, well, ASEAN or CLMVT here, we should be prepared. And we look forward that after this, even though the trade war, as Professor said, that, well, it's only one of the games that, they're playing with each other. Well, it should be a good start, as all of you, ladies and gentlemen, are here and having this meeting, and I believe that this is the third consecutive years that you've been having this meeting already. So it's a good sign that we are getting ready, and we are very prepared from what is coming, from all the challenges that would come in the near future, whatever the results would be, and whatever the games that they're playing, who would be the winner, I'm not sure about that as well. Well, we'll have to see about that. But for sure, well, as myself here, I have to confess that I'm also one of the customers of Huawei. And I was reading that news as well. Well, I'm a little bit concerned, but from what Professor has just mentioned a minute ago, so I believe that, well, I'll have to wait and see what's going to happen, what would our ASEAN countries or Thailand would decide in which way we're going for that, for the Huawei issues of the equipment as well. So I'm not sure anyone in this room are a fan like me using Huawei. You have two, right? Two of your phones there, right? Okay, I see on your tables. And I have two in my pocket, in my bag there as well, in my purse. So, well, I really have to confess that it's a very good phone. Okay, well, enough of that. That was only from my point of view after listening to Professor, and thank you very much for enlightening me here. I'm not into any economics, anything at all, but that was really something that I think it's very easy for normal people like me to understand well about what's going on right now, and we should be prepared, and we are going to be very well prepared for that. So ladies and gentlemen, coming up next, for a great prepare for all of us, that is why we're having a panel discussion on trade war, what it means for ASEAN. So please join me to welcome our panelists on this stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Ms. Lee Junjun, Director of Policy Programs from the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. And next, please welcome Dr. Sompravin Manprasert, Executive Vice President, Chief Economist, and Head of Research Division of the Bank Ayutthaya Public Company Limited. Following by Mr. Montri Mahaprikpong, Vice Chairman of the Federation of Thai Industries. And please welcome our moderator for this session, Ms. Pinchanok Wonkhorn, Director General of the Trade Policy and Strategy Office, Ministry of Commerce of Thailand. And now, as we have all of our panelists up here on the stage getting ready, ladies and gentlemen, I would leave this stage for Director General Pinchanok to conduct the session.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody, and very warm welcome to all of you. I can't express how much appreciation I feel today for seeing the room full despite the heavy rain that we had at in the afternoon. So I'm very grateful for your participation today, and that as a organizing agency for the event, if there's anything that we have done that is not pleasing to you, or there's any problem, please, my apology, but please let us know if you in want of something. And well, I think it's a bit late, so I would not be using too many pleasantries at this time, but let's go straight to the point. The topic that we are going to do I intentionally said that it is going to be a conversation because these are the people I know very well. We have been talking about the so-called trade war for months now. Every time we see each other is trade war, more trade war, you know. But so let's maybe tonight let's share our thoughts and insights that we four of us, not four of us because tonight I'm not speaking, only three of you will. But these are the speakers that I know they are very well versed and understand deeply about this issue. So I have handpicked them personally, and I'm sure that they have valuable and interesting insights to share with you. We will conduct the session by Ms. Lee or Chen. Chen will talk about trade war in the overall perspective and maybe just a little bit follow up from Professor Kishore in the broader sense of relationship of ASEAN and Asia and within the trade war. And Dr. Sompravin will talk about will show the impacts of trade war on ASEAN trade and investment. Be a little bit quantitative, so don't fall asleep. But as Dr. Sompravin is so charming, I don't think anybody will fall asleep. When you will find his material very, very interesting. And last but not least, Kun Montre will discuss about experience from the business sectors, the real life, what is happening in reality. So. I think, and then I think I will ask the first question, and then I will open the floor so that we will have engagement from the floor. So if you, once you listen to the speakers and you have something that you want to ask, please raise your hand, and then we will have a couple of questions for the first round. And if there's time, then I will ask them to speak some more. But then let's say we can start with Chen. You want to use the podium, right? So please.
Thank you very much, Kun Phimchanuk. Good evening, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here today at the CLMVT Forum. Thank you very much to the Thai Ministry of Commerce for inviting me to speak at this forum. Here, I would like to express apologies on the part of my chairman, Professor Simon Tay. He was supposed to be here at this forum, but unfortunately, he was down with dengue fever at the last minute, and he's on his way to recovery, so he would like to send his regrets. It's a tough act to follow after Professor Kishore's wonderful speech. And I'm someone who's very much used to speaking at academic conferences. This is the most glamorous event that I've been invited to speak to so far. So I hope you'll bear with me if I sound a little bit too serious. So as a Singapore-based independent think tank, on this panel, which looks at the US-China trade war and its impact on ASEAN, I think here I'd like to offer maybe 3 to 4 points. And the first point is something that Professor Kishore has already mentioned earlier, that the conflict between US and China is a deep, broad, and continuing one, and it will get increasingly worse, not better. And a lot of you have already heard that the trade war is not just about trade. It is about a shift in the way the US engages China, from an era of engagement and cooperation to an era of strategic competition. The conflict has been given many different names. A new Cold War is what some people have called it. Some have called it a clash of civilizations and ideologies. And what it signifies is a lack of strategic trust between the two major powers in the world. Now, the distrust of China is bipartisan. The Democrats and Republicans are very united in the way that they want to engage with China going on, which is why we don't see the conflict becoming better even after Trump, if he loses the 2020 elections. And on the part of China, what we're seeing is that China is unlikely to back down. A truce is possible, but a lot remains to be seen. And China is unlikely to back down because domestically, he has very little domestic space to dial back the tension. And externally, this issue has become a matter of national sovereignty and dignity to China. And this is very much exemplified by China rising duties on $60 billion worth of goods on US just last month after US raised tariffs on China. Now, what does this mean for Southeast Asia? There are winners and losers. And I guess on the upside, a lot of people have said that ASEAN stands to gain in the shifting of the supply chain from China to ASEAN. And in a sense, even before this trade war happened, the shift of supply chain was already taking place because it was becoming too expensive to do business in China, rising labor costs, and also increasing regulations. In fact, in the 2010s, Japanese companies were already moving to Vietnam and Thailand. And as a result of this trade conflict, Apple was one of the companies that was most severely impacted by this trade war. And it has started to evaluate the cost implications of shifting 15 to 30% of their production capacity from China to Southeast Asia. Within ASEAN itself, we know that Vietnam has benefited a lot from the shift in supply chain. And to some extent, other ASEAN countries such as Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and Philippines have also benefited slightly. But, and here is the but, I think we must be realistic that in the long term, the trade war might actually negatively impact ASEAN. In fact, it will all become the worse for it because of this lingering trade war. The Malaysian Deputy Trade Minister Ong Kian Min has already said that the tech conflict between US and China will negate all the short-term benefits of trade war. And Malaysia's semiconductor sector, which is most exposed to the Huawei ban, so Malaysia's economy is going to be impacted by this. The ASEAN Macroeconomic Research Organization has already suggested that escalation in the trade war could cut regional growth from 5 to 7% to 4.6%. I will leave most of the numbers to my panelists later on because they're more economists than I am. And so that's on the economic side. On the strategic level, the conflict creates a lot of difficulties for ASEAN. It forces ASEAN to make a forced decision between US and China. I say it's a forced decision because practically we can't choose between the provider, the guarantor of our security in the region, which is the United States, has been for the longest time, and China, who is in our backyard, who is the biggest FDI investor in most ASEAN countries. Hence, to force ASEAN to choose is making us make a forced choice. So what can ASEAN do about it? So here, I'd like to perhaps offer two recommendations. The first is really taking a leaf from the recent ASEAN Vision 2040 project, which is an initiative by the Thai government and supported by IRIA. So what this project calls for is for ASEAN to become an integrated and connected and seamless region, to become what the AEC has been calling for, a single leading production hub, which would really enhance ASEAN's capacity to participate, to become a global production network, and to participate in the global value chain. But to do so, ASEAN needs to overcome one major obstacle, or actually two. One is infrastructure connectivity. ASEAN needs to address the severe infrastructure gaps in this region. We know that the ADB has cited trillions of dollars in infrastructure funding that ASEAN needs. And there is funding out there. And in fact, Thailand recently created the Infrastructure Fund to help address some of these gaps. But public financing options are still very limited. So I think there is a need for the government and the private sector to work together with different partners, not just China, US, but other middle powers, including the Europeans, Japan, Australia, to come together to resolve and try to address the infrastructure gaps. And the second related point is, in thinking about becoming a leading production hub, ASEAN needs to think across ASEAN. That is, ASEAN needs to really escalate, promote its integration process with a haste, with greater urgency than never seen before. And as someone who has been looking at the digital economy, and with the Industrial 4.0 upon us, I would like to emphasize that the ASEAN's digital economy is something that we cannot overlook. In fact, it is something that we need to promote for ASEAN not to miss the next wave of growth. A recent Google report has estimated that ASEAN's digital economy is going to be worth 240 billion by 2025. High-tech industries are targeting ASEAN. AmCham China says that 40% of 250 companies aim to shift to ASEAN. And these high-tech industries are mainly into automotive, chemicals, and machinery. While the traditional sectors are still important to ASEAN, such as manufacturing and agriculture, I think we all know that cross-border services is growing 60% faster than trade in goods, and they generate much greater economic value. So ASEAN has no choice but to try to focus on education, reskilling of its population, and create a regulatory environment that is conducive to promoting an inclusive, innovative, and adaptive digital economy. I think at this point, I'd like to conclude my speech by saying that regardless of the meeting between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump at the G20 summit at the end of this month, ASEAN must remain steadfast to advocating for a rules-based global order, a free and open economic regime that is underpinned by good governance and strong institutions. In order for ASEAN to remain a bright spot, which it is, it has political stability. As we know, ASEAN has given the region peace dividend for more than 50 years, and economically, it is the fourth largest growing economy in the world. But in order to remain this bright spot, ASEAN has to have that sense of urgency to face all the multiple challenges and remain a strong advocate of the liberal trading system. Thank you very much.
Chen talks about several things that I found very interesting. You know, one of the controversial question would be, do we really have to choose? You know, between China and the U.S., we are just ASEAN trying to make ends meet, to make a living, you know, but that is a question is pretty controversial. I will not ask you publicly, but there are a couple of things that I think ASEAN and trading partners here should take heed that she mentioned two gaps that ASEAN we need to address. One is on the infrastructure that can have some more space for public funding instead of private funding. If we can step up the integration and the infrastructure connectivity, I think this is keyword. I have been walking around the room this evening. I found mainly two groups of people here. One are in the logistic connectivity sectors, and the other one are the young entrepreneur in startup. I think these are the future of ASEAN. I'm very excited. I'm not saying that the elders are not indispensable, but they are very important. They will provide the backbone for ASEAN. But then there are new kind of economies developing in ASEAN. So, and the other thing that Chen mentioned is missing is we have to have the sense of urgency and undertake regulatory and the necessary reform as soon as possible. Right. So in the next speaker, Dr. Sompravin, he's a chief economist. So of course, he will talk economics. But he would, Dr. Sompravin is very capable in explaining the economic in layman's language because he was a professor before. So we listen to Professor Sompravin today.
Thank you very much. Since I'm from research division, so I'm the nerd guy. And I have lots of graphs and numbers, but I've seen there are lots of wines being served, so I'm trying to be as simple as possible. Now, let me first recap what's going on. This summarizes the trade war between US and China. And I stress trade war between US and China. And you know that it happens in round one, round two, and I'm as an observer, I thought that, well, round three would not happen, but it's happened anyway. But let me tell you, if fourth round happens, the cost to the world economy would double the size of what already happened 3 rounds combined it, because they will increase, 20% tariff pretty much on everything they trade together. So first, let's look what's going on. This chart, we try to calculate the effective tariff rates between US and China, had all the proposed being ineffective. So if you look at the bottom, and it's average tariff rate between US and China, and if you compare third and fourth column of each country, you can see that effective tariff rate increased quite significantly. On average, it's almost double what had proposed in round 3. So lots of manufacturing activities will be levied more tariff, and as a result, the effect will be more severe than we have seen in the past. And we did some calculation. We had a model that captured trade diversions, also that capture international supply chain linkages, and this is the simulation effect. In a sense, top one is effect to the world GDP and every country, and bottom panel is effect to exports in various countries. So when trade war happened between two countries, there are two directions of impact. First, positive impact come from substitution effect, meaning, US and China has to find new partners and try to get goods and product instead of being imported from each other. And second negative impact came from the fact that we are on the supply chain of a product that eventually being consumed either US or China. And calculate this effect is difficult, but the model captured this well. And this is the net effect to the world economy. And you can see from this chart, the model said, well, the world economy will be negatively affected by the trade war between US and China. But most interestingly, negative contribution came only from US and China themselves. Look at us. We are on the far right. Vietnam, Cambodia, South Korea, even Thailand. We have slight benefits from this fight. It means substitution effects exceed negative effect from supply chain. It seems to be nice, right? It seems this is the first chart that I show to my executive at the bank, and it seems to be a good news. But let me tell you, this is a result from a model. And the model doesn't have time dimension. A model doesn't have politics. And a model doesn't have Mr. Trump.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
And, having said that, let me explain a little bit more. The model said positive things is possible, but it not necessarily happened. So let me give you an example of Thailand's case. At a closer look at the results, this is export of Thailand from trade wars. You can see, if you remember from last chart, we will be slightly positive, right? Net effect will be slightly positive. But you look at export to our partners, it means we get benefits mainly from export to US. The rest to the world, Thailand has negative export, meaning it's difficult. If negative effects happens quickly and trade diversion of the US happens slowly or take times, or even if it not happen at all, it means we got affected only by negative impact, all right? So I will skip some of the slide, but it seems scary. And you know that there's a say that in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity. And I will try to prove to you here that we are, as a member of ASEAN countries, we complement to each other very well in developing our region. Each of us can play different role in the supply chain, over the value chain. Okay. Our calculation also said not only trade diversion will happen, you have seen in the news, right? Investment diversion start to happen. They are show more interest in lots of companies that looking for a new place for production. And this is the simulation results as well. Investment diversion happens around the world. And if you can see on the far right, many of ASEAN countries will be benefits from investment diversion. You know, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, Laos, etc. And some of you may have questioned, if trade diversion investment diversion happened, we could probably compete for FDI flow, right? Well, not necessarily, because we can place on different place on the supply chain. Let me show you my last two slides. We got data from OECD. The data capture export and production structure of the world economy. The way you look at this chart, if it's to the far right, it means you engage more, you participate more on global value chain. If you are located at the top of the horizontal line, it means you're producing something upstream. And if you are below, it means you're producing something downstream. And if you look at, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia, although we are, in downstream, but we are placed in different, we participated differently on the global value chain. The one on the far right participate a lot in global value chain. There could be our gatekeepers that could help connecting us to the world. On the left, these people can provide resource for our regional activities, and the ones who are in the middle can help connecting us together. And last slide, this is complicated, but the names listed here is sector. It's various sector, like hotel, automobile, telecommunication. And I use the same data to compare where activities are in each sector. Sorry, I'll be able to calculate only 3 countries, Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia, in white and blue and orange respectively. You can see although Thailand and Vietnam production change are quite similar, but we are quite different from Cambodia. It means at a given industry, we are producing in different level of supply chain. For example, if I pick the extreme one, telecommunication, you can see Thailand place itself, its production are more upstream. Vietnam, it's in the middle, and Cambodia is toward downstream. So actually, what I'm trying to say, although in the same sector, we producing different, we are producing in different stages. So it means we can complement each other very well over the supply chain. And actually, this is my last slide. And to sum up what I'm trying to say, I try to prove to you explicitly that good things is possible. But I'm not saying that it's going to happen because it's from the model. So, in the end, it's up to us, it's all of us here to make good things happen. And my last conclusion is, I think You look at the data, we need to talk to each other more, and collaboration is the key. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sompravin. No need for conclusion. I just emphasize that we complement each other. We don't have to compete, but we have to work hard and collaborate to make that vision a reality. We cannot just look at the model and hope that it will happen. Okay, thank you very much. So next and the last speaker for now is Kun Montri Kun Mati. He would share experience from a business point of view.
Good evening, Your Excellency, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. I decided I will not go to the academic presentation. Actually, I prepared two presentations, one in the bigger scope and one in the so-called the cluster level, to the industry level. But again, you can download that from the MOC website. All right, I don't want to get into that. Okay, just would like to get into the reality that what really happened in the world right now. And I'm not going to let Kun Phimchanok ask me the questions, okay? In turn, I will ask you the questions. But you don't have to answer as well. Thank you. First of all, would you rather call this US-China trade war, or you would like to call it trade tension? Or you would like to call it something else? Culture crash, technology competition? But I believe that more than 80% of this room keep talking about it as a trade war. So how long do you expect the war will end? Definitely, some of my friends asked me that when it's going to end. I said, you call it a war. So it takes time. It will take some time. Look way back to World War II, 5-10 years. World War I is also quite a significant time frame. So as long as we call it the trade war, believe me, I believe that, our professor is here. He's already mentioned that it will be monumental. It will be there. Further to that, what I have heard is USA start asking ASEAN to choose. Do we have to choose side? In APEC Business Advisory Council, we always balance RCEP with CPTPP, even in the past when US joined the game of CPTPP as well. I mean TPP in the past. But now it's just TPP 11. We always balance Asia-Pacific and Indo-Pacific. So why do we have to choose? Now, I come back to my questions though. How many audience come from China? Come on, raise your hands. I don't ask you the questions. I exchange some business card from Guangdong people. All right, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now, I asked the question, but you don't have to answer. China currently, with the trade war, you have the oversupply. Now, should China learn how to slow down the production? Or should China flood ASEAN countries with your products? In the real business world, I believe a lot of businessmen is here. We used to learn from the experience sometimes that we produce less for more profitability. In the business sector, we used to do that. But I put a big question mark whether China will learn how to produce less. In turn, it's starting showing the significant numbers that a lot of Chinese product is flooding ASEAN Is that what we need? No. What we need is the FDI from China, not the products, because we can produce it here as well. So, how can Chinese manufacturers will be able to be here in ASEAN and make sure that you will use the regional content of ASEAN? What happened in the real world in our so-called the fruit industry, agro industry today? We see the figure and we were very happy with it. The number is rising dramatically, and eventually we know that it's all Chinese who are running the business here in Thailand. Is that the FDI that we need? Probably no. The next thing that I just learned last week from the trip going into Nanning is China is now reducing VAT, somewhere around from 17% to 13%. So what would be the implication of that 4% difference? What Chinese government is trying to do? They are trying to leave more money in the pocket of Chinese people. So that means Chinese will have more money to spend domestically. Chinese government, they learn. They know that they have some difficulty on the exporting to US and some other part of the world. But today, what they are trying to do is to nurture the local consumption in order to make sure that their GDP keep rolling on. Now, what ASEAN countries shall do? We learned from the past 2 years in the global value chain, where you can see in the chart a few minutes ago. We supplied lots of parts to China, and today we hurt. We are hurt. Shall ASEAN start thinking of changing the product portfolio, sending to China? They are ready to consume. They have 4% more of money in their pocket. They will have 4% more of money in their pocket. Shall we start thinking about reformulating and restructuring the product portfolio into China instead of sending semi-finished products to them and then they reproduce it again and re-export it? But on the other hand, I believe that every Asian country may experience the same situation, that we start exporting to US more and more. But most of the product that we export to US is turned out to be semi-finished products. We export to US, we export to Mexico. We export to Canada probably a bit. What's really happened is the USMCA, it's another puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle that's really happened during this trade war. Automotive parts business is making money right now, shipping from ASEAN countries to Mexico and US itself. But that's not for long, because so-called the protectionism phenomenon that US of A has been creating for the past 2 years, it's turned out to be a regional protectionism, because they are now combined force with Mexico and Canada in order to make sure that the regional content will creep up from 62% to 75% in the next 3 years. If that really happened, what will happen to ASEAN? We are so happy, sending our automotive parts to Mexico and USA right now, growing more than 25 to 50%. But that's not for long, as I say. You'll be happy for the next 3 years, So, shall ASEAN start thinking if this regional protectionism prolong in the medium term or even the longer term, shall we start thinking of expanding our production into the region of USMCA or even China itself? Moreover, this morning I believe that in the ASEAN summit, there's a statement that ASEAN will push RCEP and to make it happen within 2020. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that is a key message that we send out to US, that we has already been choosing side. Because RCEP, the key player is China. As I said, shall we choose? Shall ASEAN join force to participate in CPTPP? US of A is not in the picture at the moment. But from what they are doing right now, I believe that eventually they will. Instead of each country in ASEAN walking into CPTPP agreement, why don't we join force and join CPTPP as a community of ASEAN? Why let Vietnam walk in alone, Malaysia walk in alone, and Thailand's trying to make decision whether we should walk in after the new government. Philippines is, next in line. What is the spirit of ASEAN? Leave nobody behind. Where is it? Why should we walk into the CPTPP only economy by economy? Why don't we walk into that CPTPP as the ASEAN? And there's a chance that we have the bargaining power as the ASEAN in the CPTPP as well. I have a very good example on this. In APEC Business Advisory Council, we used to talk, raise hand as Thailand, as Singapore, as Malaysia. But our word has never been heard in APEC Business Advisory Council. The past 2 years, I believe Kun Piyabut is here as well. He used to be APEC Business Advisory Council member. We set up an ASEAN caucus, a small group, and start talking what is the common grounds, the common issue that we have together, and start talking to APEC. Then, our words are heard from the other member economies. So this is another proposal that I would rather talk to ASEAN, that walk into the CPTPP as a Kalai community instead of walking in alone. Further to that, we've been working together in ASEAN tourism. And we I rather call NATO, NATO, no action, talk only. We've been talking about that for quite some years, but I don't see any feasible project happen. Some project has been proposed in APEC level and in ASEAN level for the past 2 years about ASEAN cruise. If we really push this thing and make it happen, we will link it together, and then when we show the world that we work together in harmony, at least we have some project working together and make it successful. I put up one question though, because way back 20 years ago, I have the experience watching Korea did something very successful. You know Samsung, right? LG, Hyundai, Daewoo. 20 years ago, those 4 companies produced exactly the same thing. Electronics, cars, shipyard, steel. And one day, the president of South Korea called all of them together and said, you choose to focus one business. And then those 4 companies choose where they would like to go. Samsung go for brown goods, LG for white goods, Hyundai for automobiles, Daewoo for steel business. And then they survive. What I propose here is for ASEAN, do we dare to drop something that is not our core and concentrate it on what we best at? Cambodia, quite good in agricultural processing. Laos, it's a land link, resources, logistics. Myanmar, oil and gas. Vietnam, also logistics and the deep sea port. Thailand, auto parts, for example. Indonesia, electronics as well. Philippines, business process outsourcing. Shall we do what we're good at, combine force, because we too much alike? And eventually we compete each other in the world platform. I know that we has been succeeded for the past 10 years as ASEAN. But we don't want to collapse in the next 10 years. So what we should do is combine force, do what we're good at, drop what we're not good at, and then we march together and work together with the world. This morning as well, a word from our Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha. ASEAN DNA is quite a word that we have to scrutinize and find out what is our DNA and join hands and walk along together. All right, so that's the real world. Something is happening out there. It's a jigsaw puzzles. It's not just only China and US of A. Today, USMCA is playing some game with us as well. US-Japan starting. US-EU is starting as well. US-India is starting as well. So if I may ask, all the implications that I raise up the questions here in this meeting room, I would rather make the same implication to the other trade tension, US-Japan, US-EU, and US-India. Thank you very much.
I think in the interest of time, many people want to go back home. But if there are urgent need for a couple of questions from the floor, please, or comments. Or if not, you can, for those of you who are returning tomorrow, you can leave more questions with me. We can communicate via the website or the other communication channel. วันนี้นะเด็กพอสมควรแล้ว yeah ค่ะ okay so you are older than I thought โอเคค่ะวันนี้คิดว่าคงไม่มีเวลาถามคำถามนะคะ I think that there's no time for questions today because it's pretty late and I thank you very much for coming today and I'm sure that we have learned something very specific from the academic, very economics, you know, real life, real model evidence that give you more ideas on what we can do together. and very, very controversial proposals from Kun Montri, very controversial indeed. As a person in trade negotiation, I think what he has just proposed is pretty, it's monumental. Just use the word from Professor Kishore. So I think we go back home and think about what trade war means for ASEAN. There's no definite answers. There's no definite conclusion because this is evolving, but it will affect us. And I think we can meet together and discuss other issues in detail or maybe in other forum. For tonight, I thank you very much, and please have a safe trip back home. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. A big round of applause to our panelists and our moderator. One